If you're a transport operator and you need to know what a payload management procedure is and how to complete one, then this video is for you. So what is a payload management procedure and when do you need to complete one? A payload management procedure, also known as a PMP, is a document that shows comprehension and compliance with the design approval's payload height restrictions. It's a condition for PBS vehicles where the payload height is difficult to be verified by roadside compliance officers. This is typical for A-doubles carrying shipping containers, but can also be applicable to other vehicles and load types. A PMP is required if the following operating condition appears on your design approval. The operator will need to demonstrate how the final payload heights are managed prior to the issue of the vehicle approval. This information must be provided to NHVR and the results of the method used must be measurable and verifiable. This condition requires a PMP to be completed before a vehicle approval or a VA can be issued. Drivers must keep a copy of their PMP and VA in their possession and be able to produce them if requested by a compliance officer. Certain PBS vehicle combinations require a restriction on the maximum payload height to ensure safe operation and compliance with the PBS requirements for rollover stability. Please note, if a vehicle requires a load height restriction, containers with unknown load heights must be transported on another vehicle. A vehicle's rollover stability is a key safety measure, as crashes that involve heavy vehicle rollovers are strongly associated with severe injury and fatalities. The rollover stability is sensitive to the track width and center of gravity height of the vehicle. The suspension properties of the vehicle also influence rollover, but are less important when compared to the track width and center of gravity height. As the center of gravity height increases, the likelihood of vehicle rollover also increases. The payload height directly affects the vehicle's center of gravity height and are defined in the design approval to ensure the vehicle operates within its rollover stability threshold. The load type is another factor that has influence on the vehicle's stability and is often split into two types of freight: uniform density and mixed density freight. Uniform density payloads have their mass equally distributed throughout the volume of the load space. Examples of products include, but are not limited to, grain, gravel, sand, box ceramic tiles, and canned drinks. Uniform density assumes the center of gravity height is at the centroid of the load. Mixed freight is a general type of payload with heavier items placed on the bottom of the load and lighter items placed on top. For example, palletized grocery loads where canned foods and soft drinks are stacked on the bottom, with biscuits and toilet paper stacked on top. Mixed density freight assumes the center of gravity height is approximately 40% of the load height. Because of the difference in center of gravity height between uniform and mixed density payloads, uniform density loads will typically have lower height limits compared with mixed freight loads. Please note that load height limits are usually different for GML, CML, and HML. These height differences correspond to the mass for each scheme. As GML masses are the lightest, they are usually allowed higher payload heights compared to CML and HML. It's important to be fully aware of these differences, as both the height and mass must be taken into consideration to be fully compliant. A PMP document is not required when the maximum load height specified in the PBS Design Approval is within 150 mm of the vehicle's overall height. This 150 mm allowance is to accommodate for the top rail at the door opening of the container, and for a workable space in packing the container. So for vehicles 4.3 meters high, with payload heights of 4.15 meters and above, a PMP is not required. Sometimes operators may be transporting mixed density freight loads only. As some vehicle design approvals don't have height restrictions for mixed freight loads, a PMP may not be required. This means the VA will be issued allowing mixed density freight loads only. When PBS certifications are submitted to NHVR, the PBS certifier should advise that only mixed density freight is being used. All that will be required is a single-page declaration stating that only mixed freight is being used, with definitions for both uniform and mixed freight. This should then be submitted to NHVR at the time of certification. Please note that the VA cannot be issued until a declaration or PMP is submitted. The procedure must contain the following information and demonstrate how the payload heights will be achieved and maintained. To meet these requirements, we've made a template document available on our website. This should be modified to suit your specific needs, and the grey worded section should be deleted once complete. Please note, two example templates have been made available for use, one for container vehicles and another for tankers. The following example will be for container vehicles. If you require a PMP for a tanker, then please refer to the tanker template, as this will refer to fill heights and compartment capacity limits instead of payload height limits. These templates are voluntary to use, and you can come up with your own. The templates have been designed as a guide to help operators meet the necessary requirements needed for a PMP. The PMP document must identify the transport operator's business name, the PBS application number, which is a 6-digit V number as shown on the design approval, the DA number, which is a 4-digit number also shown on the design approval. The vehicle type must also be listed, and it must also contain a unique document number. If you aren't aware of this information, please see your PBS certifier or the vehicle manufacturer, as they will have a copy of the design approval document. The PMP must be signed and dated by an authorised person, with a declaration stating that all personnel involved in the loading and operation of the vehicle have been made aware of the payload height restrictions and training will be provided. The procedure must include instructions for container loading personnel outlining practical steps to load the container below the correct payload height limits. Instructions should include similar steps to the following example. 1. Determine the applicable mass limit, either GML, CML or HML. 2. Confirm the applicable payload type, either mixed freight or uniform density freight. 3. Establish the maximum fill height limit, determined by the mass limit and the payload type being used. 4. Measure and mark the fill height limit inside the container. 5. Any load above the fill height limit must be removed, or the container must be transported on another vehicle which does not have load height restrictions. The PMP must contain a table of the maximum payload heights as shown on the design approval. When determining these values, please ensure you are using the correct variant, as some design approvals will contain several variants with different payload heights for each different design. As discussed earlier, load height restrictions do not apply if they are within 150 mm of the vehicle's overall height. This example shows unrestricted loads in green and restricted load height values in red. Next, the maximum fill heights in the container must be determined. The procedure must clearly state how the heights were derived and the calculation shown. Details of how the fill height is calculated in the table should look something similar to the following. Max fill height equals the PBS max payload height minus the twist lock height minus the container floor thickness, where the PBS max payload height are the values as per the PBS design approval. The twist lock height is the height from the ground to the height of the twist locks where the container sits, and the container floor thickness is the depth of the container floor where the container sits on the trailer twist locks to the floor of the container where the load is placed. Values will need to be specified for the twist lock height and the container floor thickness. The twist lock height will typically be determined by the certifier as they will be measuring your vehicle, and values should match those in the vehicle diagram supplied by the certifier or the manufacturer. The fill height table should show each fill height for the applicable freight type and mass scheme. Finally, definitions for the different load types, payload heights and mass schemes need to be stated. We discussed the definitions for uniform density and mixed density freight earlier, so feel free to rewind if you need a refresher. The PBS maximum payload height is measured from the ground to the top of the freight transported within a container and is found on the PBS design approval. The maximum fill height is the load height within the container and is measured from the container floor to the top of the load within the container. For each of the relevant mass schemes, definitions can be as simple as stating the abbreviations in full. Photos and diagrams are also helpful to be included on the document and are highly recommended. Please note that as you complete this template, it can be modified to add additional procedures and information as you see fit to suit your specific business needs. So just to summarise each section, the PMP must contain the company name and PBS design information, must be dated and signed by an authorised person, must include instructions for loading personnel, PBS payload heights, the maximum fill heights inside the container, definitions of load type and mass schemes. Photos and diagrams are optional, but highly recommended. The chain of responsibility law ensures everyone who works with heavy vehicles, from the businesses that employ drivers to the place where goods are delivered, is accountable for safety. It's your responsibility to do everything you can to make your transport work actions safe. A PMP document serves as evidence of the operator's awareness and importance of payload height restrictions on PBS vehicles. It's a risk management tool and communication device through the chain of responsibility. Transport operators who use PBS vehicles are responsible for ensuring that all parties involved in the loading of their vehicles are aware of these requirements. For more information on chain of responsibility and payload management procedures, please visit our website.